We will talk a lot about small urban settlements in rural areas for 2 days. So I will, to create a contrast, start in the other end of the spectrum. I will start with some big things. Big dreams. If you search for the future of cities on Google, this kind of pictures will show up. Strange pictures. Similar but strange. They will all depict big cities, huge buildings, skyscrapers, and creative infrastructure. It is like the future of cities is about the future of things, really. You never see any urban life illustrated in this kind of pictures. But you see creative infrastructure ideas, highways in the air, and I think this image is trying to catch the moment where trains are becoming obsolete, replaced by these, flying things up here. Still no humans. We also have green suggestions for the future. Sustainable cities, same recipe but other colors. This is funny because once we don't have an innovative transportation system, we have an innovative advertising system. The ads are flying in the air, This type of images are deeply rooted in our culture. They are everywhere, in movies, in books, magazines, newspapers. They are following us wherever we go. Even if you go to an academic conference in Oxford about the future of cities, you will see posters about that conference with this type of images. So they are everywhere, all the time. Which is strange because this type of future is about 120 years old. Why are we living with this old idea of the future still? It was related to the second industrial revolution. And, in the 1890s, about 200 books was published about the utopian cities. One of the writers was this guy, King Camp Gillette. He was the guy with the secure razor. We are still buying them. He was an utopian socialist, and he was arguing for a world corporation. We should only have one corporation owned by the people. And he actually asked Theodore Roosevelt if he wanted to be president of that, offering a salary of $1 million. But Roosevelt declined the offer. His idea was that we should have all people in America should live in one giant city called Metropolis, powered by the Niagara Falls. And this is his idea of this one city, some kind of modular construction. I think the idea was to have 30,000 people living in each model. Anyhow, we had crazy ideas even in Europe. The Futurists published a manifest in 1909. They had the same idea. And this is an idea of a futuristic railway station by Antonio Santella, one of the most famous futurists. It looks like this in the photographic rendering. It could be built today in Dubai or something. If you have a good sight, you maybe can see something here at the bottom. That is humans. So this is an auto-scale buildings. And then we have the modernism and the ideas of the separation of functions. They were also utopian socialists. But their ideas merged with big capitalism in a very formative moment, 1939. The New York World Fair, the world of tomorrow. It was financed by the car industry. And one of the biggest exhibitions there was the General Motors Futurama, seen by 42 million people. So those ideas about the science fiction future continued in the 60s, in the 70s. And in 1995, Rem Koolhaas published this. Asian City of Tomorrow, the layered city. Amazing. But why are we still living with these pictures, these images? I have my own theory about it. I think our symbols of the future were slowly dying during the 80s and 90s. But suddenly cities started to grow in Asia. And people in Asia needed symbols for the future. So we in the West, we exported our old images to the East. And when they materialized in the East on a grand scale, they were coming back to us now presented as news. So we have this interesting circle. What goes around comes around. So we had news from China, 120 years old news, actually. And then came the hype about megacities and statistics. Half of the world population is now living in cities. How many times have you read that? I read it every day, more or less. So the media image of the city is that real cities are big and they are growing fast. They should have a lot of skyscrapers, and urbanism is about size, you know? That is the image. At the same time, we have young people dreaming of other things. You know, the hipster generation. They want to have walkable streets, slow food, small firms, bicycling, public space, etc. They're dreaming about this type of cities. This is also covered by the media as a contemporary thing, but never as a thing for the future, strangely enough. So, let's go back to statistics. The truth is that we are in a period of rapid urbanization in some parts of the world, but not everywhere. 90% of the coming urbanization up to 2050 will take place in Asia and Africa. According to statistics, the West is already super urbanized. You know, about 80% are living in urban areas. But what about sprawl then? If we are already super urbanized, why do we discuss this sprawl thing then? Now it became very interesting because the statistics about cities is based on administrative borders, not on the city as we perceive it, you know, streets, parks, and public space and that stuff. So if we are talking about the real city, it is not true that 50% of the population is living in cities. I would say in Sweden, 5–10%, if we're talking about cities, like physical cities. So if we see the city as an urban form, there is a scarcity of that form, and we have a huge demand for it. And the urban form comes in all sizes, from urban hamlets to big cities. Have you been in Italy, Tuscany? You maybe have noticed that everything is urban there. Small urban hamlets, urban villages, small cities and big cities. So what do I mean with urban form then? I will give you an example from Sweden because we don't have this type of dense settlements in rural areas in Sweden, but we have a few examples. And this is Lundsby outside my hometown in Västervik, which clearly demonstrate what is an urban form. 8 houses are formed and creating a square here in the middle of a crossroad. So here we have a communication route, we have private spaces and public spaces, where we can have a meeting between inhabitants and strangers. And this meeting is the beginning of civilization. And this type of meetings are extremely attractive. If you go to a big city and find places that you really like, it will be places where you have a local hangouts and strangers together. However, in the 19th century, large part of the Swedish population were living in the country in small urban settlements. But we had a land reform where we told the people that you will not allowed to live like that anymore. You have to abandon the hamlets because you have to have your house close to the new field. And this process was very harsh. It happened in 50 years or something. And this really changed this country. You know, Sweden is a little bit crazy. You know, we have a special mentality here. We're extremely individualistic. And the start of that culture, it starts here in this landscape of isolation, where you don't have any public space at all. But we are longing for going back to the old system. And that's why you are here today, especially you speakers from different parts of the world. You are here to give us knowledge and inspiration for ruralism or urbanism in rural areas. So most welcome.